Hi, my name is Chris Clausen. When I'm not running my paint business, playing music, or walking my dog Bob, I'm a yoga teacher. It all started in 2000 when I made a bad jump on a trampoline and broke my lower back. After about a year, I tried yoga as a way to reduce my chronic pain and increase mobility. Over time, I learned it's not just what poses are best for my back, it's how to do them correctly and in a way that's best for my body. Now I'm virtually pain-free and doing things that I never thought possible after my injury. So in 2007, I became a certified Iyengar yoga instructor and have been teaching classes and privately ever since. In each episode of this show, I'll focus on an area of the body and teach you how to do poses that will help you reduce pain, increase mobility, and just feel better. I'm Chris Clausen, and this is The Yoga Show. Hi everybody, my name is Chris Clausen. Welcome to The Yoga Show, the show where we look a little bit more deeply at poses and the people that do them. I'm very pleased to mention my guest today. My guest student is an old friend of mine, Dave Kalola, a drummer, musician that I moved down here with more than 20 years ago down in Nashville in a band. Big shock. Anyway, we're going to be doing some interviews and we're going to talk and practice some poses that are beneficial for musicians and drummers in particular. So if you're interested, stick around. This is The Yoga Show. You had some sciatica before. Some problems. What was going on?
I've had some low back problems on and off, since I was kind of a young guy.
Right.
But the sciatica was something new, and I guess it was kind of, I would imagine, pretty sort of typical presentation, just, shooting pain in the low back. And
go down the leg.
A little bit down the leg, yeah. Right. It's the kind of thing where, I just couldn't get comfortable, standing, laying. When it was bad, it was kind of gnarly all the time. So there were some gigs that I'd turn up to and wonder, I'm loading my gear in, sort of,
how am I going to make it through?
Yeah. And then you know how it goes. You start playing and you forget.
Right.
And then it's fine until you stop, and then you're like, wow, okay, this hurts again. Let's play another set.
I know, let's get back on the stage.
Let's do some more.
35, almost 40 years now.
Yeah, that's right. Probably closer to 40.
We played we played hundreds of gigs together, and I do know, like, sometimes, like, how hard they, people forget how hard they are on the body. Because you're using all four limbs and you're sitting up, that there's a lot of, middle back work that you're doing. And I'm sure that's, you're having it and just supporting yourself and keeping yourself stable while, the other limbs are moving all over the place.
Yeah, ideally, some abs, I would guess. And,
right.
I don't know that I think too much about it. It's probably just sort of second nature at this point. But yeah, there is. I think it affects your sound too. I think a more open, posture and the breath and that flow. Yeah. That can help your sound a lot, I think, as well.
With that in mind, there's a lot of technique involved in even the most simple pose, like Dandasana, staff pose. So I'm going to ask Dave, we're going to take our legs, take your hands behind you, Dave, fingertips if you need to, press down. Now, straighten out the legs, have your feet a little bit apart. Start by extending the heels first. Point your toes towards you. And now push the heels into the floor. Push the thighs down. Anchor the heels, and then push through the mounds of the feet.
Push the foot forward then?
Yeah, not the toes. See if you can get the mounds of the toes. Yeah. So he's trying to push the thighs, the calves, the heels, everything into the floor.
So you're flexing that muscle.
So yeah, you're flexing the quadriceps. So in all these poses, in Dandasana, forward bends, anything, the thighs, kneecaps should be firm. And this is a big mistake that people make automatically, like right off the bat, is their legs are very soft when they're trying to do these poses. And it's not as beneficial. So again, from there, press the hands into the floor, take your lower back in and lift the chest up. Go ahead, walk your hands in more, come forward if you can. Yeah, keep the legs straight, press the thighs down. Roll the shoulders back. So the next pose we're going to work on is Upavista Konasana, extended separated legs pose. Again, this is really to loosen up those hamstrings, the backs of the legs, the calves, the knees, as well as getting the hips opened up. You can see that the shape of the pose for the most part is the legs are wide apart. I'm going to ask Dave to take his hands behind him on the blankets and just press down. Now begin to straighten out the legs. So you can see, for starters, it's a little bit difficult for Dave to get the legs to really straighten out and open up. So I want to ask him to get a blanket and sit up a little bit higher. If you're at home, if you don't have these specific, yeah, just one more blanket, fold it up, same thing. And then straighten out the legs again. If you're at home and you don't have like yoga blankets, you just get some towels, stack them up, or some regular non-yoga blankets work fine too. But you can see already that Dave, is a little bit easier for him to get his legs straight. Now again, he's got his hands behind him, pressing into the floor, and I'm going to ask Dave to pull his lower back in to lift the chest. And as we've been doing in Dandasana and these other poses, you've got to straighten out the legs, and there it is. More so through the inner legs. Roll the inner knees and inner groins to the floor. And if you look at his feet, you want to try to get the outer edges of your feet to point up towards the ceiling. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. Right, yeah, it's different. It's a different feeling, isn't it?
I've never been so good at this one.
Right, well, that's okay. But you also want to think about trying to extend, lengthening through the inner legs. And what does that mean? Is you want to just sort of try to make the inner legs longer than the outer legs and just chew on that thought for a while. And you may notice again that there's a little bit of freedom that happens in the ankles and in the knees. To come out, he just releases and brings his legs back together. So we're going to work on a pose called Baddha Konasana, bound angle pose. Some of you might know of it as butterfly pose or cobbler's pose. I want to ask Dave to straighten his legs first. Then, as we've been doing, he's going to take his hands behind his knees and then bring the soles of the feet together. He's holding onto his feet and he wants to lift his chest. But what I can see very quickly with Dave is that his knees are quite a bit higher than his hips. And that just means that the hips are a little tight, which is why we're doing this stuff. In order for him to find a little bit more release and get benefit from the pose, I'm going to ask him to sit up on a blanket a little bit higher. And again, if you're at home, you can use a towel or just a regular normal old blanket. It doesn't have to be a yoga blanket. But what you can see is when he sits up, suddenly the knees are a little bit more in line with the hips, a little bit higher up, and it helps him find a little bit more freedom. Now, instead of holding onto your feet, Dave, I'm going to ask you to take your hands behind you on the blanket right by the hips.
Okay.
Push the hands down, lift the chest up. Good. Now, as we did before, as I asked him to do before, he's going to release from his inner groins towards the knees. He's going to lengthen the inner leg. And in fact, sort of shorten from the outer leg back to the hip. Can you feel that? It's interesting. Again, it's not just a release. You're actively doing something. Now, one of the things I'm going to talk a little bit and keep Dave in this pose because longer stays in this pose are really quite good for you. The reason they call this pose a cobbler's pose, the reason sometimes it's called cobbler's pose, is because the cobblers of India would repair the shoes. They'd put it between their feet and they'd work on the shoes. And I don't know who does this research, and I'm very glad they did it, and I'm glad I didn't have to. But apparently, the cobblers of India have a lower instance of reproductive and urinary problems.
Huh.
It's very good for the reproductive organs and the organs of elimination. And again, it's very good to stay in this pose. I often say that this is a TV pose. Instead of sitting on a couch while you're watching TV, maybe take 5-10 minutes, sit on the floor in Baddha Konasana while you're watching TV instead. This is also one of the very few poses that you can do on a full stomach. Most times, most poses, you cannot do that. But if you are full, you could still get away with doing this pose without struggle. But how's you feeling? Okay?
Yeah,
it's good. Yeah, I mean, it's not. You're not going to wear yourself out. It's not intense. But if you do hang here for a while, you will you can gain some very good benefit, again, in the areas of reproduction and elimination, as well as the hips, lower back. Baddha Konasana. So the next pose we're going to work on is a pose called Janu Shirshasana, which is another pose to sort of help open up the hips
and open up the backs of the legs. So I'm going to ask Dave to separate your feet a little bit. You're going to take your right hand behind your right knee. Take the hand behind the knee and turn the knee from inside out, and then you're going to pull that foot in. Now turn the top of the foot to the floor so that the knee and the shin are even. What I mean by that is when he turns the top of the foot to the floor here, his shin and his femur are working in the same direction, so you're not twerking the knee at all. This is actually, when you move the foot that way, you're protecting the knee itself when you're doing this pose. So from here, and you can see also Dave has a little bit of support on that outer bent leg. Mine's a little looser, it can come to the floor, but if it wasn't, I would have support there too. Now both of us are going to get our straps and place it around the foot. The trick is to lift the chest and turn the body towards the straight leg. So he's going to rotate the belly even towards that extended leg. Again, keep the leg straight. Press your left leg, left thigh into the floor, press your left heel into the floor, and then to come forward, we bend the elbows away from each other. Keep the chest open, and then you can, as Dave's doing, you can hike your hands up the strap. Keep extending forward as much as you comfortably can. If you can take your hand to the foot, that's great. The goal, though, is to let the head be the last thing to release down. The chest should go first. Keep that leg firm. Keep that thigh firm. Janu Shirshasana. And then when he comes out, he's going to come back to the half position, Ardha position. He's going to come up and then release the strap and come out. When you come out of the pose, you take your hand to the outside of the leg and extend it. And we're going to do both sides. That feel okay?
Yeah, feels good.
Cool. So you're going to take your hand now. Again, we are trying to protect the knee when we're doing all of this stuff. So you take your hand behind the knee and pull it out. And you turn the top of the foot, again, more to the floor. Take your hands behind you, lift the chest up. And then go ahead and get the strap around the foot. So we want to start again in this half position, this Ardha position first. Pull the lower back in. Lift the chest and push the foot into the strap and straighten out. There it is, Dave. Straighten out that right leg. And then to come forward, keep the right leg straight as you come forward. Keep the kneecap lifting, the thigh firm as you extend towards that straight leg. And again, let the chest go as much as you can. And then finally the head can begin to release down. But what happens is that that straight leg keeps wanting to give up. You have to keep reaffirming that right thigh. And believe it or not, that actually protects the hamstring. Then come back to the half position, Ardha position. And then he's going to release, come out. So another way we can do this pose, Janu Shirshasana, is using support for the head and for the chest. Often you can use a chair or anything you might find at home. Dave, in this case, we decided to use a drum throne. So Dave, go ahead and get back into Janu Shirshasana to the right. So you can see, again, he takes his hand behind his knee and he places that foot, the top of the foot towards the floor. Good. Now, we're going to get the chair, throne, bolster, support, whatever it is, in front of Dave. And he's going to come forward from here and just rest his forearms on there and rest his head. You can rest your forehead on your forearms. Yeah, but again, even though you're relaxed, you still want to keep some integrity of this down leg. So this feeds into releasing the hip. So we're working on opening up the hamstring, but also releasing the hip on the other side. His job is to keep reaching the side ribs more towards the seat. And then he comes out, he pushes his hand into the seat of the chair to come up. Janu Shirshasana. So the next pose we're going to work on is a pose called Paschima Uttanasana, which is a very complicated way of saying seated forward bend. That's all it really is. Legs are straight and a seated forward bend. So I want to ask Dave to grab that strap, because some of us are just not flexible enough to take our hands to our feet. This is where we bring the strap. So I ask Dave to get the strap onto his feet, and then he's going to straighten his arms, straighten the legs. Now what you can see is there's a little bit of a rounding in the back. And I'm going to ask Dave to keep his legs straight and do all the things that he did before with the other poses, with Dandasana and Upavista, separated leg forward bend. Those thighs are firm and pressing down. And I'm going to ask him to give himself a little more slack on the strap and try to get his lower back in more and his front chest up. Look at that, much better. Lift your sternum, Dave. Good. And now this is harder. Again, this is one of those deceptively easy things where it's actually quite a bit of work. To push that, are you feeling work, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Lift the chest up. Keep pulling that lower back strongly in as you push the thighs down. So this is the Arda position. This is the half position. To come forward, he wants to keep trying to lift his chest up. To come forward, he's going to bend his arms like he's pulling himself forward with his hands. And you can hike your hands up the strap a little bit and do the same thing, but keep trying. Eventually you have to give up, but keep trying to get this lower back in as you bend forward. Hike your hands up the strap more. And come as far forward as you comfortably can now, Dave. And you can even bring your head down if you want. Very important point. Bring the head down last. We have a tendency to want to lead with the ego, with the brain. This is where the ego resides here. We want to lead with the heart and then let the head come down. Look great, Dave. Come back up. And release it out. So how did that feel? Again, was it kind of harder than you thought?
That's good. I like that pose. Yeah, it's challenging.
Yes. And it's good. And again, you feel it in that area of the lower back.
I do. Yeah.
And of course in the hamstrings as well. Yeah. So this is just another variation of the seated forward bend, Paschimottanasana, only we're going to do it sitting on a chair. In this case, Dave was kind enough to bring his drum phone, so we can be a little bit more in the drum realm. I'm going to ask Dave to straighten out his legs. And make sure you're sitting right kind of at the edge of the throne. And then he's going to take his strap around his feet. Over the mounds of the feet if you can. And he bends forward, and you can see, as we did in the last pose, that the lower back tends to round a little bit. So I'm going to ask Dave to draw his lower back in and lift his chest up. And then when he comes forward again, he's going to pull the elbows away from each other to extend forward. And then he can hike his hands up the strap a little farther and keep coming. But the nice thing about doing the pose this way is gravity is working a little bit more for you. And then you can, oftentimes you might even be able to get a little bit deeper into the pose because gravity is complementing the work. And you can see Dave is methodically easing his way deeper and deeper into the pose. He's still keeping his thighs firm, hopefully. Are his thighs firm?
Yes, now they are.
Quadriceps should be firm. The kneecaps need to be lifting. And again, in order to get more benefit on the hamstrings and the backs of the knees. And again, you can see that Dave is continually working his way deeper into the pose. Time can be your friend in yoga poses. And then when he comes out, he gently releases and comes on back up. So that's seated forward bend on a chair. How did that feel, man?
That's good. I've never done it like that.
Yeah, it's a nice way to do it.
Yeah, very nice.
It's cool. Yeah. So the next pose we're going to work on is just a variation of the last pose, Baddha Konasana. This is going to be more of a reclining version. So if you've had a long day, this is really a nice way to do this pose. So I'm going to ask Dave to bring his soles of his feet together like he would for Baddha Konasana, as he did before. And then he's going to take this blanket, that handy blanket, the one that you have at home, and that great blanket that you have at your house. You can take it, wrap it around your ankles, and pull so that the feet get a little bit closer to the hips. And then he's going to lie down. He's going to go lie down. And then he's going to pull again. Pull the blanket closer so his heels get closer to his hips. Finally, I'm going to ask Dave to just bunch up the tails of the blanket on the outer thighs a little bit for support. And then he can just release his arms with his palms up. So this is a Supta Baddha Konasana, a reclined bound angle pose. Very good for the inner groins, very good for the reproductive organs and the organs of elimination. Also just very good for calming down the lower back. If you've got some back problems and really bothered, just getting into this pose can sometimes release the lower back quite nicely. Now when Dave comes out, I want him, he's been stretching those inner groins quite a bit, and I don't want him to work those too hard, so I'm going to ask him to take his hands to his outer knees. Take your hands to your outer knees, Dave, and push the legs together with your hands so your groins don't work so hard. Good, and then he's just going to roll to his side. And then come up to sitting. And this is another pose you can do. You can stay in it for quite a while. It does nothing but good things for your legs, for your hips. Supta Baddha Konasana. Was it good, Dave?
Ta-da.
Yeah? All right.
That's good.
Cool. Their primary business is providing hemp-based dog products.
That's right. That's right. Earth Dog is a hemp dog product company. We make collars and leashes and toys and beds, harnesses. And we've been doing that, my wife Kim and I, for 20 years now. We're in our 20th
Yeah, I saw
year.
you hit your 20 years.
20
I saw it on
years.
Facebook.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a neat business you guys got going on.
Oh,
I mean,
thanks,
I remember when you first thought of it, I was thinking, man, I don't know how they're going to pull this off. I hope they can eat, you know. And
we didn't really have any plans of eating or actually anything like that. We just were trying to make collars for our dogs and then dogs that we were fostering for Natural Humane.
There you go. So you've had more than a dozen dogs.
Yeah, we're extreme expert dog
And you know what? That's the
people,
thing. You're the real deal. You don't just play a dog lover on TV.
That's right. That's right. We live
guys,
it. Yeah,
right.
For better or worse, we're living it every day.
And the thing, and what's also amazing is the good work you guys do. Right, you're doing a lot of stuff again, like you said, through the Humane Society and fostering and raising money for causes for animals.
Yeah, the past several years, that's right, been raising money for spay neuter, and we were fortunate and pleased to help out the pet community center the past several years and help.
And you had some sciatica before. You had some problems. What was going on?
I've had some low back problems on and off, since I was kind of a young guy.
Right.
But the sciatica was something new, and I guess it was kind of, I would imagine, pretty sort of typical presentation, just, shooting pain in the low back and
go down the leg.
A little bit down the leg, yeah. Right. It's the kind of thing where, I just couldn't get comfortable, standing, laying. When it was bad, it was kind of gnarly all the time. So there were some gigs that I'd turn up to and wonder, I'm loading my gear in, sort of,
how am I going to make it through?
Yeah, and then you know how it goes. You start playing and you forget, and then it's fine until you stop, and then you're like, wow, okay, this hurts again. Let's play another set.
I know, let's get back on the stage.
Let's do some more.
35, almost 40 years now.
That's right. Probably closer to 40.
We played 100. Yeah, right. We played hundreds of gigs together, and I do know, like sometimes, like how hard they, people forget how hard they are on the body, because you're using all four limbs and you're sitting up. That there's a lot of middle back work that you're doing, and I'm sure that's you're having it and just supporting yourself and keeping yourself stable while the other limbs are moving all over the place.
Yeah, ideally, some abs, I would guess, and I don't know that I think too much about it. It's probably just sort of second nature at this point. But yeah, there is. I think it affects your sound too. I think a more open, posture and the breath and that flow, that can help your sound a lot. I think as well. I've not had any wrist problems, as I know a lot of guys do too.
Yeah.
So
I think you think Joe Morello kind of.
Yeah, Joe helped me tremendously on that. Yeah.
He is the technician. He was,
I
remember years, and again, he was studying with Joe for years, and I remember all the technical stuff he was having to do.
Yeah, changed my playing life 100%. Like,
I would say that's probably why your wrist and shoulders aren't bothering us.
Yeah, likely because he had some very famous students, Max Weinberg being one of them.
Right.
Max had over 10 surgeries, I understand, for tendonitis and all that. So a lot of that stuff is about just learning how to move properly and
these very small refinements are the things that can make all the difference. That's why you go to yoga and actually take from a teacher instead of just doing it right out of the book, because there are, again, the little techniques that can really make a big difference. So in the last episode, I talked about the 8 limbs, or the Ashtanga of yoga. And I mentioned the first limb, which is called Yama, translating to the universal ethical disciplines. And what is considered to be the most important of these ethical disciplines is the practice known as ahimsa, which means non-violence or non-harming. When we practice this idea on the mat, we can look at it from a physical perspective or even mentally and emotionally. Physically, we can ask ourselves while we're doing the poses, are we causing pain on ourselves? The most obvious thing. Another way of seeing it is, are you doing poses that maybe are not quite appropriate for your body, or trying to go past your own limits? We can do this also emotionally and mentally. When you're doing the poses, there are, quite frankly, some poses that we like better than others. Some might even allow themselves to say, I hate this pose. Are you criticizing yourself during your practice? I'm terrible at this pose. And again, these are all sort of general throwaway statements that we make that are actually very subtle forms of violence that we do upon ourselves. The great thing is, the beauty is, that we can practice this stuff on our mats. And what's even more important is that when we get out into our daily lives, it's easier to apply what we've learned on the mat. We can become less violent to the world around us, and we can at least be more observant of our tendencies while we're out in our daily lives. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Yoga Show. I would like to thank my friend Dave Kalala for coming by and doing some poses with us. If you're interested in getting some dog products, some hemp dog products, you can go to earthdog.com. If you're interested in having Dave play some drums for you, you can reach him at dave@earthdog.com. Until then, I will see you guys next week for the Yoga Show. Stay tuned. See you soon.
Something to ease my mind. I seek the hand of time. It's up to